This week in our Eating an Intentional Community series, we're talking specifically about eating with family and saying that give your family the gift of presence. And in particular, talking about presence around the table.
Right. Yeah. Presence, as far as relational presence, is maybe harder and harder to come by these days. One, busyness, schedules, lots more activities. The more affluent our cultures become, the more things we're able to engage in and opportunities present themselves, which is a blessing, but also a challenge, right? In this case, where we have a hard time connecting around a table together, even as family units. And another little distraction piece that keeps coming up in these formational habits is our devices. Yep. Even when we are together, our interfacing is sometimes interrupted because of this, right?
It's funny how, like, when people used to look to the future and see, like, forecast all the technological advances, they would say, like, well, there's going to come a day where we're going to have so much leisure and just be able to enjoy time with each other and the good things of life, because we'll have all these things that make our life easier. But it's funny how as we add more and more things that make our life easier, that we seem to get fuller and fuller and less present with each other.
Amazingly, stress rates are higher, anxiety rates are higher, all these more modern conveniences and yet greater anxiety and stress. Yeah, so one of those maybe lost arts, even you might say eating as a family is an art, I don't know, but it's a dying one if it is an art, and is something I think probably, Neil and I are both in our upper 30s, and in our lifetime,
very upper,
this has shifted so much. Maybe even the homes we grew up in versus the homes that we're leading now. I know mine looks different a little bit. It's a constant challenge in our home of trying to be present around a table and have shared meals together where the whole family is together consistently. And I know you have an example growing up.
Yeah, I mean, well, so even when we were growing up, I think it was already a dying art at that point, because I remember looking around at my friends in high school that they rarely ever ate meals with their family, and so I felt like uncool or something, that I'm always having to eat with my family, because my parents really made a big deal of really breakfast and dinner. We were going to be at the table together somewhere, even if that meant that we had to grab something fast at McDonald's or something. We were going to make it happen, and it kind of drove me crazy. And I, looking back, I think, like, what a jerk kid, Like, I had some attitude issues in my adolescent years, but I'm not proud. But I am proud of my parents, looking back, for making that such a big deal. I think that it's important, and especially now as a dad, I get that more of like, this time is short with our families, with our kids in the home, and there's something about the table.
There's something about it, and we've been talking about it together throughout this formational habit. There's something spiritual about it. There's something deeper than what's superficially happening when we gather in that space and we are present with each other. And I mean, there's tons of research now that's bearing out that because of the absence of meals, it has all sorts of other impacts on a child's literacy rates and vocabulary, and even they're drawing correlations to lots of behavioral issues and all sorts of things, right? Where maybe this is not something that we should forsake, that there's something more going on in that setting. But it turns out that actually this whole thing of being too busy or being focused on the wrong things is not just a new challenge. Right. In fact, we get to read about some ladies who have a learning experience with this, with Jesus of Nazareth themselves.
And it's funny how Jesus had these things figured out, and now people are paying all kinds of money to research and find out, he was right. Turns out he was right.
He was a really wise teacher. Yeah.
So this is one of those cases where you've got this example of Mary and Martha. It's actually, Martha who invites Jesus over, and then she's doing the work of hostess, and preparing food and like getting ready for this, I guess probably a dinner party they would have that night or something. Her sister is being present with Jesus, sitting at the feet of Jesus, learning, being present. And Martha's mad because like she could use some help. We've all been there at some point. So, she comes to Jesus and says, would you make my sister get up and help me? Like, I think there's probably also like a male-female thing going on there, like
Likely.
roles, for that culture. But his response is interesting.
It's very interesting and kind of a rebuke. I'd like to think that it's, maybe in love. I mean, I'm sure it's in love, but maybe even, I've heard it read in different ways, and I like more of the Martha kind of is how I interpret it, I guess. Tone doesn't always come through in the written word, but it's the sense almost in my mind of Jesus, like, you're missing it, like, do you hear what you're saying, Martha? Look what's happening in your home right now, and you're concerned about what's going on in the kitchen, and Mary's at the carpet, and I just want you to be here with me. She's chosen the most important thing, and that therein is the lesson of this a lot of times, is that, when we are saying no to something else, is so that we can say yes to something better. And family meals require a no so many times to other things so that we can say yes to that invaluable time.
And saying yes to all those other things, we have to recognize comes at a cost. And we're saying no to other things that may be more important, in spite of what our culture says. So this is something that's been kind of a convicting thing to me and a cautioning thing to me as a parent, is this idea of what the world says my kids need to have a leg up in the world, or to be given every opportunity that they need, may not be what my kids need the most.
Wow. Yeah.
And what they may need more may not be popular in the eyes of the world, So the world would say, well, we need to give them the opportunity to go and do this and go and do that. And then families end up spread so thin and running all over the place, and they lose the quality time with family that has been the bedrock of healthy families and healthy kids forever.
Well, and then family is the foundation of society, is the building block of society itself. And we see all this erosion of that, and you come to something like this where the family unit, the family dynamic has shifted so much, and we can't help but wonder how much that all of those things are related. It's complex, but certainly that's a layer in everything that's going on. And, it's fair to say, as we do in all of these, that there's different seasons of life, and there's different things. So this is going to look different as you discuss this as a group today, about focusing on those that you're with. And some of us still have children in the home. Man, this can correlate though to husband and wife relationships, no matter what season of marriage we're in. And again, the lost art of dating and sitting down face to face as husband and wife and sharing a community like that. No matter where we are, and sometimes it's even multi-generational meals and the intentionality of that.
Around the holidays, what do you do with, what does that family tradition look like?
Right.
And so I'm thankful for, grandparents that really emphasize, like, hey, let's all get around one table at one time. And, it was a spiritual thing.
That's right. And another good thing to process, because some of us might be checking out and going, it's not going to happen. We've talked about it. We've made New Year's resolutions about it, and it's not going to happen. I mean, one thing is, remember, our rule this month is one meal a week, and that might be the baseline. That might be like one intentional meal where the whole family is around the table a week. Surely that could happen. However, Kara Powell is the author of a book called Growing With, which is specifically about raising adolescents. And she talks about this challenge in her home, and she's a researcher and a psychologist, so she's very well aware of the importance of this time, but was recognizing that in her own home, it was growing virtually impossible. They had kids in swimming and other activities, and the whole family just wasn't gathering around the table as often as she was hoping to accomplish. And so she said, you know what, rather than surrendering or throwing it out altogether, they just kind of shifted gear and changed it to family breakfast. And most mornings, she said, they would get up, and that was their shared time around the meal. It was sometimes a big breakfast, sometimes it was cereal in a bowl, but the consistency was, this is when we're together. And she said that actually became one of the most beautiful parts of raising her teenagers, like that they reflect back on and look back on, like that was meaningful. So it doesn't have to be in a box. Like, we don't have to think Mayberry, Aunt B, and Opie and Andy around the table every evening. Maybe we think outside of the box, but with the heart and the principle of being present.
Yeah, and that was being intentional for her. Like, and it took a level of sacrifice, I'm sure, for her part to make that happen each day. But so, you know, that's where we have to kind of each look at our lives and figure out what's going to work for us and for our family. But at some point, there's got to be like a decision, you know,
right?
That, hey, we're going to do this, and let's try this first. And
And then let's just do one more element here, because someone's like, okay, well, I'm at the table, but how do I get more intentional when I'm at the table?
Yeah.
And there are some things from our morning teaching that will help maybe shed some insight on that. But one simple question that we recently heard at a conference was just a question of, where have you seen God work today? You
That's
know?
great.
And so it's a simple question that brings some spiritual conversation around the table will just even add a depth and richness in that environment.
And that's one of those questions that, like, the first time you ask it, you make it crickets, you know? But I think if we keep asking it, it's the kind of thing that can generate some interesting conversations.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, have fun discussing.